and I'm just wondering.
That bad, or it ain't that, or maybe, you know what? He's trying to. There's an end game here. He's trying to get a little something here. He's trying to make it. Black man trying to make it in America. I don't know. It was hard for me. Like, I'm not. Look, the book is about him, so she's a part of that story, whatever. That part was very confusing me because I just can't visualize that part. Now, to be fair, I can't visualize a lot of stuff.
Hey guys, welcome to MahoganyBooks Book Club. This is our discussion of the May book that we read, Shoutin in the Fire. Yes, this is June, but we're discussing our May book. We meet the first Friday of every month to discuss the previous month's book, and it's already hyped and loud, and about to get more hyped and more loud. So this is going to be one for everybody. So just some quick housekeeping notes.
Oh, we started.
I can borrow some.
Some quick housekeeping notes. Again, my name is Derek Young. I'm one of the owners of MahoganyBooks. I'm into my homeboy, my partner, my co-host. I'm definitely a very mad brother right now.
Are you
mad about the book?
Very
mad about me.
Panama Jackson.
Very visceral brother.
I'm happy. Are you mad too?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm mad. A lot of
I'm not mad.
No,
so we're going to get into it. So,
Derek picked it. If you were curious, who picked it?
Yeah.
You can direct
Let me
your
just say,
anger.
Derek said he my boy and I'm going to have him on my podcast. Remember
Right.
that?
Yes, it's his first episode. Now they're going to have a two-parter.
Yeah.
Now you break
So let me finish this. Hold on.
Let us interview him.
Let me
I told him no.
finish
I know.
So we are going to discuss Shoutin in the Fire. As you can hear, we are very animated, very ready to get into it. But I want to let you guys know that you can comment on Facebook, on YouTube. We will definitely respond. We'll definitely bring your comments into the conversation. And we're just going to be real, y'all. So that's how we've always done it from the jump. So we want to keep it that way today. We're also enjoying our refreshments in the DC heat.
Yes.
So
Libation.
let's get into it.
Literally shouting in the fire.
Yes. Literally.
So this is a book that, yes, I picked. Okay, so to put it out there so everyone knows.
Stay proud.
I'm going to stand in it.
Mm-hmm.
Stand in
You
it.
stand behind this?
Yes. Shoutin in the
sit
Fire,
beside him.
written by Danté Stewart. And I'm excited for this book
Like
because
his wife.
he has agreed to be like the first guest on my podcast.
Ooh.
So I'm going to hit him up shortly to get scheduled so we can do it. So before we jump into it, let me give you guys lay the ground, at least my thoughts,
Yes.
right?
You think you watch?
Before, and he may be. I hope Brother Dante is watching.
It's
It's all out of love.
Brother Dante, hang up.
No, Dante,
No.
I got some good things to say.
It's all out of love. I wanted to read this book because I think we have there's a missing voice and a voice that we need to hear more of Black men in specific situations. Right?
Yeah.
I think we need to hear more from Black men when it comes to like emotional maturity, when it comes to dealing with like our mental health, when it comes to these moments that a lot of times is hidden because of our perceived notion that we have to be uber masculine and be like this type of stereotype. And that's not who we are, and trying to be that leads to more harm than good, right? And I wanted to read this book to have a conversation about this particular situation where you have a Black Christian Southern man, right? And one of the things that I find very interesting in this book is that there is a heritage of faith throughout his entire family, right? I found it to be very, very interesting, from his grandparents to his parents to his, like, that's how they were raised.
Yeah.
And that's I think there's a lot that we can talk about there, especially in the face of white supremacy, racism, and I guess what I'm hearing from you guys, groups trying to fill quotas of certain type of people, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to have this conversation. So we're going to have an honest, open conversation. So I'm going to pass it to my co-host first and let him kick it off. And if this is your first time watching, Brother Panama is the hot take king. So we're going to see if he delivers any hot takes in this opening salvo.
I mean, I don't think I have any hot takes about this. It sounds like, based on the conversation we had previously, that many of us are on a similar page, or at least in the same book.
Yeah.
To some degree, even if we're all different. So I struggled
A lot.
with this book.
Wow.
Now, I'm curious. It seems like those of us who did, might have struggled in different ways. So for me, I have this thing at this point in my life about Black pain and not spending all of my time delving into it. This book is 100% Black pain from page 1 to whenever. I did not finish it. I could not. To be honest, I could not finish it. It was difficult for me to even get as far as I did because I got, for two things. One, the black pain was too much for me. I'm just like, it's like watching the Passion of Christ. It was just like, you know what? I can't do it. It's too much. There was also too much of I could see the rude awakening coming. And as somebody who didn't go through, like, I don't understand how you get to this place. So that was a struggle for me too. The other thing though for me was when it wasn't the personal story, there was a lot of what felt like kind of going forward in the Baldwin-esque, or like these luminary writers that we all know and index and love, like trying to literally write something that was going to be viewed in that way. That's how I felt reading certain parts. And that made it difficult for me because I know as a writer, like, you can't force that stuff. If you write something legendary, it's because you wrote something legendary. You can't write a legendary thing that is just going to be picked up that way. So for me, I also listened to this book. So I can hear how this is something that could be performed, right? This is and I don't mean like at a poetry slam. I can see this being preached from a pulpit. I can hear some of that, like the punchiness of the sentences. So it was like, it wasn't written so much to be read, so much it was to be spoken and said out loud and shared in whatever. And that made it difficult for me because it was just like the black body, black pain, like in these short sentences that would just like punch me in the face with the pain that I was like, I got it. So I struggled for those reasons with this book. And it made it hard for me. I couldn't finish. I'll just be honest. I couldn't finish. And I do agree that there are stories that need to be heard. Everybody's story, I do believe, is one worth sharing. I believe there's a way to share everybody's story that would make for a compelling read. The way this was executed did not do that for me. Pass the mic.
Well, we jump in?
Yeah.
I've already spoken.
No.
Well, I'm still gonna come back, but
Okay.
I would like to hear your perspective.
You know what? I didn't see it as the pain wasn't that bad to me. I think I struggled with the idea of a black Southern man disassociating himself from blackness and going to this evangelical church and actually buying into it. That's what I struggle with. So for me, it felt like I think that's a story that does need to be told because I don't understand it at all. How are you black and disassociate from blackness to the point that he did intentionally? And even being in those churches when people are being killed and they're just saying, "Oh, God don't see race," and you went too far down that road, and then you in church, and it's problematic that you had a black wife, and she didn't check that.
That's what I'm saying.
On another note, readers, and probably most of us, we've been reading Toni Morrison, Baldwin, Richard Wright forever, right? It feels like he's real new to it. And he needs to put all their names in the book the whole time.
And he should.
According to Amanda, it's like almost like you said, he's trying to be profound, but you overkilled it because most people like Ta-Nehisi Coates, you can read his book and tell he reads Baldwin. You can read Imani Perry and know they read Baldwin. You can read.
You just know.
Kieh said, you know they're reading Baldwin. You know they're reading Morrison. You know they don't have to say it.
And the white man gave him his first black written book, so he should chill.
I don't understand. I think that is something to be explored. I think in terms of
100%.
black folks who are
There's
who
an exploration
disassociate from
there.
blackness, and then it really pained me when he said, and I was like, "That's what your ass get." When he was in the neighborhood running, and the white dude was taking pictures of him. What make you think that you belong there? That you a white black man running, they ain't gonna take a picture of you, which looking crazy? It's almost like he was shocked that the man was looking at him. But why are you shocked? So that's what I had troubles with. The fact that you went this far on this other end. If you're from the South, more than likely, not 100%, but more than likely, if you live in the South, yet you have generations of people from church. It's just what people did.
Well, that's what he said.
Right, but my point is that, so for you to go from that
To
all the way to evangelical, what?
It's confusing. I'm confused how you got there.
So I'm thinking now, are you real? Are you really black now?
Okay.
When I say really black,
right.
what I'm saying is that when you get indoctrinated to that point where you're teaching school at these people's school and all that, right? You didn't crawl. All of us probably had moments, glimpses of that type of behavior, perhaps. But for you to go all the way to the other end and be teaching at this school and all that, that's a lot. And then I'm concerned about his wife.
Mm-hmm.
Where she's problematic in the fact that you didn't check it, or was she going along with it?
Or he just didn't share her part of the story too.
She did a story to tell in the thing that says
We've
been
that's a book. That's a book.
That's a book. I want to talk about it because it's no way.
But
It's no way a sister. I mean, it's no way a sister
It is his story.
And that's what I said,
it's also his story.
It is.
It's fair for him
to not
tell his
include her.
story.
And he did say in the
He
end
points out
that
how
we've
much
been
he
through.
hurt her. Now he talks about
He
that.
does.
He's like, I
Yeah.
owe her apologies for the pain and the hurt and everything I caused her. So there are, I think that we said absent, but I think you're right. It's not absent, but like
It
on
ain't
the
her
periphery
story.
a lot, because I imagine there's a lot between them that there are things that I would want to keep out of a story if I'm telling my story.
And he says it in
Maybe
the
she
back.
doesn't want it. It's like, like she doesn't, I'm not trying, I'm writing a book about how bad I look
Right.
effectively.
Right.
I don't need to drag anybody else down
I
here with
agree.
me, so
I
I'm
agree.
going to do my best not to. So I'm trying to give that grace there.
Yeah.
Because that is something, as somebody who will write a book, will probably have to drag people down. I'm going to have to make a couple people absent. Listen, I'm a black man living.
No, and I think that's fair. I think he says in the end that his wife, something like we've been through it, and like something like it's not her story to tell, but the fact that she stood with him
And had his black son.
and two black children, I said, praise God.
So I
Bow down.
go ahead. I don't think he's performing. I think he's young. I think there's a difference. You kind of pointed it out. Like he starts making this transition 2017, 2016, 2018. It's only 2023. So he has not been immersed in things that are everyday and commonplace, particularly in DC. There's a different culture here for me, anyways, than growing up in the South, and so I think he's new to it. So I don't know so much that he's trying to like perform as much as he's so excited about James Baldwin and Toni Morrison, who he wasn't saturated in when he was reading a few years ago. I think he's only 30.
Okay.
And so, or
32.
32.
I think he's 32.
That makes sense.
So I'm not saying that that's too young to
But he
have,
moved to
but he
it.
didn't start this at 16, right? Like he didn't start reading Baldwin at 16. And so that's how I took that aspect of things. For me, it was hard to read about so much self-hatred that he named, but he named it. And I thought that was important, but it was hard to read about it. And I know a lot of Black people who have been or still are in that place. And so I think this story is really important from that.
I agree. I can appreciate that he shares his story, right? Like no matter how badly it frustrates me and I struggle to get through the book, I'm always going to appreciate that he had the courage enough to share his story, knowing that there are so many people who are going to be against what he shared, right?
Yeah.
I grew up in an area where everyone was white, right? And for me, I think I struggled with it the most because you didn't have an excuse, right? Like my first experience with Black books was in college, right? I never read Black books before I got to college. And so for me, I'm like, we had very different experiences. You grew up in the Deep South, you went to church, like our experiences are not the same. And to know that you were raised and you had this background, you were surrounded by all these Black people, and then you went into college and completely changed, it didn't sit right with me. And I think that was my struggle with it, because to grow up in an area where I can see how important it is to be accepted by white people, right? Like I want to be accepted. I want this is what seems white, right? I mean, right. White is right. So I want to be a part of that. But then I struggled with how did we get to this point? And I don't think he really clearly explained to me how he got to that point, which is why I got so frustrated, because it's like, yeah, I was in the college choir with Black and white people, and yeah, I was always this church boy, and I was on the choir, and then eventually I started going to this church, and I told my mom that I wanted to be baptized again because she wasn't really saved. I think all of that I struggled with it. Like I couldn't understand how did we get to this point, which is why I was so angry with the book. And that was why I couldn't keep reading it. I was just like, I don't get this.
So interesting. I had so much empathy for him, like
Oh, I
the
love that.
entire book.
Wow. Preach.
Because I think,
Yeah.
so when we think about like the people, like the civil rights movement, all these things, we didn't even go that far. George Floyd. Yeah, there was all the people who were marching. Most people were at home, right? Civil rights movement. Most people were at home. Everybody can engage. Like everybody doesn't have the capacity to engage, right? Engage Blackness, fight. And I think some Black people choose like their way of saying, I'm not a victim. Personally, this is how I feel like Candace Owens. Yeah. Like I refuse to be a victim to this. So like this is my way of like taking control over it and controlling things, something that's happening to me where freedom would mean that I don't have to be Black, right? I'm just Ravi walking in the world. And it's like they force the issue, right? So like he's not Dante, he's not Black, he's just himself. And I'm gonna force it. Like I'm gonna force everyone to I'm just gonna be me, regardless of like the reality of like what it means to be Black here. I'm gonna force the issue. And because that's literally the only way I can cope. Some people can't be the Toni Morrison's, how he talked about, they write about so much pain, but then there's also like always hope, always joy to like rebound you. Some people can't take that, right? To be a kid in the car and somebody shoots at you, right? But he knew what that was. It wasn't like he didn't know what it was. He named it very clearly what that was, but also what that did to him. And he had to move on. He had to live, right? All of us are trying to figure out how to live in these Black bodies, and everyone doesn't do it the same. And I really try to have so much empathy for how Black people go about being Black and living, because this thing
It's
lit, but it's treacherous, right? It's a treacherous ride.
But where was his empathy for others? Because It wasn't just, okay, I'm going to go off and do it how I have to do it. It's not only am I going to go off and do it how I have to do it, but you're doing it wrong. And he's calling his mother and saying she's
That's
doing
the
it
whiteness
wrong.
that he had embraced.
That's a white supremacy.
And that's why he named it.
evangelism.
He named it later to say he was terrible to the people he loved.
Yeah, yeah.
And he went on to say, I was terrible to my wife. And he didn't say it, but I think part of him is like, thank God she didn't leave me.
Well, I actually got that impression that he realized that was because he did talk about how she, like, her interaction with some of his worst moments in terms of like so I got, even if it wasn't stated explicitly, I kind of got the impression like, she's still here. Thank God for that. He knows this could have easily been.
Well, he said, I loved whiteness more than I loved my wife.
And
He did say
I mean,
that.
but y'all forgot she married him. Cause let's be clear, when she met him at Clemson, he was already there, so she knew.
He was on the way there.
he was on
He
the
was-
way.
yeah, he was on the
They
way.
were in the
No,
choir
no, no,
together.
no.
They met in the
They
choir
met in the choir. They were both going to the same thing. Thinking the same. That's what I'm there. Yeah, they were in this together. I think she recognized it earlier and was able to separate herself from it and maybe stood in it longer because of her love for her man. But I really do believe that there was some of this was also appealing to her as well.
Yeah.
So I think that there's
And maybe she just came to her senses a little earlier.
a lot earlier probably.
To your point about his age, then maybe he should have written this book in 10 years. Because Blackness is not a toy. Like, this is not some new thing that he's found that now he has to tell everybody about. Like, he needs to live in it a little bit more. He needs to have a little more experience and then maybe he could tell his story.
Because he's excited about some balls.
Well,
I think for people who are in a similar place than him,
This book is great for them.
Is neat. So
I think it's the
need.
right time.
Yeah.
I think I do think as we age, we just get more nuance,
Right.
and we just get more settled into our identity. But I don't think that means he wrote too soon. I just think there's some things you lose
Right.
when you don't have more time to marinate, as my dad would say.
and skill set, right? I think also his youth also lends to him being a young writer, right? I think there's better nuance he could reflect with an even greater understanding of how to be a writer, of how to tell a story, how to
Because the story
get you emotionally connected to where he is versus just feeling like you're an outsider looking in. I also think, and this is not to be it is, but it isn't. Like, this is the thing that aggravates me about, like, the idea of retail racism, right? This is a young man, his family, growing up in the South. I don't know, I can't remember if you mentioned what part of, I think it was South Carolina. Right, what part of South Carolina. So just imagine how many bookstores
It's like Dylan. I think I
were around him, right? Around his family. How many of those bookstores actually had black books?
Right.
And the deeper not just the up here books, but the ones that go deeper. So, because the thing is that if he did not get his first black book handed to him until after he graduated from a white person, his mama never gave him one.
Derek, they ain't gonna let you get away with this stuff.
His dad, no. Let me finish the point. His daddy didn't give him one. To me, this just reinforces what white supremacy is.
It
Right.
does, but Derek, you can't let it. You can't.
Hold on. But so my point I want to get to is this is why we have to fight harder for more control of our communities and what's in them, right? Because the whole point of white supremacy is to make you forget.
You had no idea.
He
Is
talks
to
about
erase-
that in the book, actually.
Is to erase your history and your heritage
Yeah.
from you and think that your blackness is inconsequential.
But Derek, on the flip side, now this is this is a broad brush I'm gonna stroke.
Mhm.
More than likely, in South Carolina, he was in a black neighborhood. Right? Let's just go a little further. More than likely,
he went to a school with.
He went to a
teachers.
school more likely with black folks, even if he wasn't reading books, right? He went to black. He's that. His blackness, even without books, because a lot you don't need the books to solidify your blackness. I hear what you're saying. Like now, I went to school. I was raised in Alabama. I could read any book under the sun. I've been reading since I was 5 or 6. Right? Wait a minute. Most of the books I picked up probably were like Flowers in the Attic. I wasn't thinking race at all. But I was very conscious that I was black because I was in a black neighborhood. Everybody I saw was black. I know I didn't go to school with any white. I knew white kids, but they were on the other side of town somewhere, right? And I was very solidified in my blackness without reading. I don't know if I was reading the books or not. I just know I was a reader. Let's go a step further. So more than likely, he was singing from them hymn books. Them black hymn books, right? I'm just saying, more than likely.
I agree with all of what
So
you're
for
saying.
us to say that he didn't have black books and his blackness wasn't solidified, that doesn't make sense when you're thinking about race and place, especially in the South.
But
You're constantly reminded in the South that you're black.
But it's also-
You can't get away from it.
This is not 1970. He has Google.
I-
He has Instagram.
I
Just
agree.
because his mother never gave him a black book doesn't mean he doesn't have access.
But
I have a different take on that.
So,
And I think based on my experience, I can understand how even if your parents, like my parents are Jamaican, they came up here and in their mind, they didn't even want me to associate with black people, right? Because their mind coming in is black people don't take what they have seriously, right? And so you're coming in here, you're supposed to work. My mom really enjoyed that my friends were white, right? And loved that I was speaking proper and didn't want me to learn the language of the Jamaican culture because it was all about speaking proper and not being like the other black people, right? And so for me, I understand like my parents' story is very different. They struggled in Jamaica. So for them, it's like, I only care about you going to college and being your best. I don't care about the stories and the history and everything else. And so when you go to schools where everybody is white and the books that you're reading has nothing about you, there's no representation there, right? I think sometimes we have this assumption that just because he was raised in a black community that he was, this whole idea of giving students black books is a new thing, right? Like introducing them to black books is a new thing. And I think that I can understand that he wasn't necessarily exposed until later on, and that we make this assumption that because he was living in South Carolina, that he was being exposed. And I don't think every parent sits down and has these conversations.
I don't think he's exposed, but just it's like being in DC and not knowing you're black.
So
Even if you ain't a reader.
But he did know he was black.
He did know he was
growing
black.
up.
And my bigger point, so it's not just the books. It's everything that goes along with it.
Yeah.
It's the commercials you're watching,
Yeah.
the music you're hearing, the imagery around you is telling you blackness is not good.
Yeah.
That's the message, right?
I get
Not from us, but from society. If you want to do well, right, you don't want to be considered urban, right? You don't. There's all these different dog whistles that are put out there to say separate yourself from your blackness.
He talks about that in the book.
No,
I can see that,
we
but I
get it.
just never had that.
We get it because there's a different. Not all family, like his family had a heritage of faith, right? There's other people who have a heritage of activism. Like there's a culture in your family that talks about the importance of certain things, right? And if the importance is get this education, get up out of here, get this job, your blackness doesn't matter. It makes you more susceptible to this idea of when I get here to this place, I see this white Jesus. I see all these accoutrements of success and all that stuff over there. Let it go, right? And I think it's the reinforcement of why we talk about, I think it's how society goes about reinforcing these ideas of white is good, black is bad. Why we have a white Santa? Why Jesus? When the Bible clearly states
he black.
He ain't white.
He ain't white.
But we know. But in every church you go to,
he white.
But you know
That's
what?
where I'm a house.
But you know what? But
They didn't even change it. They left it just like that.
But you know what? I think this conversation is showing us the complexity of being Black.
Right.
For instance,
Yes.
what you're saying right now, for me, everybody's different. I never, and people who watch, and I'm reformed now. I am, but we were raised like white. God forgive me, and I hate to say it. You know, white people are dirty. You know, they're not clean. You don't want to go in their houses because they're not clean. They were exactly what we were taught not to aspire to be. That was just my household. Like in my whole community, we thought they were dirty. Like I had never touched a white person before, and I went to white high schools. I wouldn't touch them. Their hair, I thought it was dirty. I thought they was dirty.
Right.
I'm seeing my sisters when I'm 5 or 6 go off to Tuskegee. My first sister went to Tuskegee when I was probably 6 years old. They coming home with afros, bell bottoms. I was like, when I grow up, that's what I'm gonna be. They were never, and I went to high schools with mostly white. They were not even in my view, if that makes sense. I didn't see them. I didn't compare myself to them. I didn't think about them at all. My goal was that I was going to Tuskegee with my older sisters and get an afro. Period. They would come home with their little friends from college and they would sneak in the room and smoke cigarettes and all that. And I was like 6. I'm fascinated by Black women and Blackness and all that. So I never compared to whiteness. I don't know what my schools were doing, but my community, my family was so Black till it just wasn't on my radar. Like white folks weren't on my radar, if that makes sense.
I think that's his point. I think so. For me, with the 2 things, right? That we also have to critique and indict the Black church. The Black church,
Yes.
up until recently,
Yes.
never talked about race in church.
No, they didn't.
It's Jesus from sun up to sundown,
That's it.
right? And that
Yeah.
church on Sunday was a motivational speech to get you through the week.
Mm-hmm.
For you to come on Wednesday, get your little shot,
Bible
Yeah.
study.
and come back around
Sunday.
on Sunday morning for Sunday school, right?
Right.
And
Exactly
Yeah.
what it is.
so in some way, the Black church set him up
Mhm.
to do he did in an evangelical church, right? Because he went there and it's just about Jesus, which is very familiar because the church at home is just about Jesus.
Yeah.
And things will get better by and by, right? Like it's these tropes and scripts. The difference is that they were doing that because of trauma, right? So like one of my friends, Chris has come here before. He's from Tulsa.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't find out he came back from Jackson State, where he learned about Black Wall Street. Came home and was like, "Did y'all know?" He's like, "Oh yeah, we used to live over there." What?
He learned about the Tulsa
he
massacre.
learned about the Tulsa massacre
Yeah,
at
that's a
Jackson
new
State.
thing. It's a new thing.
He's
Based
from
on most
Tulsa, right? And he had no idea that this thing even took place. And not only took place, and his family had businesses on Black. He had no clue because the trauma made everybody shut up.
Like
Right?
he writes about his
Like he
grandma.
writes
Yeah,
about it, right?
yeah.
Doesn't want to.
And so it's like while he's Black on some level, in a lot of ways, because Black people don't always talk about Blackness.
Yeah.
The only time you will hear about Black is that's when we're in pain, when we're being murdered, when we're being killed. And if you don't get no other kind of, right, which is what the books will do for you, the discussion, the nuance of being Black, right? Because when you're home with your parents, I don't look at my dad and be like, there's a Black man. That's just my daddy, right? So like the joy I see in my family, as a kid, I wouldn't be like, there's some Black joy going on around here. We're playing cards. Like that's just not.
Right.
But see, I
You're
did
right.
that though, and I think about this a lot with me and my sister. So I remember my dad told this, these stories of growing up in New York, and he went to like some fancy science school. He lasted 2 weeks, and he talked about how these white kids chased him home, throwing bottles at him until he stopped going to the school. He said every day they chased him home, they beat him up. It was terrible. And so these are the stories I grew up with. And I remember my sister had all these white friends, and I'm like, their parents were the ones chasing daddy, right? Like, and so I was like that kid, and she was the complete opposite. She's like, these are my friends, and I'm just like, who do you think chased them? Like literally, like that was our interactions as when we were growing up in this house. So. And my dad was a deacon. I grew up in the church, so I agree. And I think I do empathize that way with when you say it's Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. But like you said, indict, we don't talk about the damage the Black church has done. We don't talk about that often. So for you to say the Black church was the gateway to how he was fed this, I think that makes me see it a little differently.
Yo,
I also think that we can't underestimate the vultures that white evangelical Christianity produces and reform Christianity, white reform, like.
Yep.
I totally believe in their ability to snatch someone up who has some sort of unresolved pain, some sort of unresolved something, which is kind of hard to be Black in America and not have pain, something, and the right timing to snatch someone up.
And then football being God. Remember, he said that I'm on the stage. I'm not different than them. I'm playing football. He got accepted. So I would say it's more of the vultures, more so than the Black church that was the gateway for him. Think about it, he's just a vulnerable situation. You're a young person at a white college. What do you want to do? You want to fit in.
Yeah.
And then here come the people, the vultures, and you go.
Yeah,
we can't be like and I'm Team G. I'm Southern Baptist. I was raised. I'm in this church. I mean, one thing about me, I'm a worship, but also
I'm a praise God. I'm supposed to tell you what's wrong with church.
I beg my pastor. I would talk to him at least when I was still in Chicago. I'm not gonna say his name, Reginald Sharp Jr. That we need to have. And he's an amazing phenomenon. The reason I even brought it to him is because he went to Morehouse, the first liberation theology. Like he is phenomenal. So I'm like, oh, this is a conversation we need to have. We need to have a conversation in the Black church about the role of Christianity in the demise of Black people and how Black people are fleeing from the church and why. We refuse to deal with the fact that Black people, Black men, are saying goodbye to the church. Even though the church was the place of civil rights, was the place of organizing, all those things, and how we transitioned and got to this place where everybody's leaving the church. And we don't want to talk about it. There's a ways that you can talk about, confront both, that you can worship and love Christ and still deal with what the institution of Christianity has been used in our community and how it's hard to wrestle with it today, not the 60s, now. Why it's difficult to wrestle with Christianity and Blackness in America today. And we have to deal with it in the Black church if we have any chance of people coming back.
Y'all, I don't know. This conversation is so deep and complex. It's deep for me. There's so much, like everything I'm hearing, like the insidiousness of white supremacy is what we are talking about. Right? To be able to put this man into the sunken place, essentially.
Without the spoon.
There were some shiny things.
They were dull.
You know,
They were that shiny.
for you, but for him, right? It was a shiny thing, right? And when we think about even right now, we are dealing with since the murder of George Floyd and when they locked up Chauvin, like so they called him guilty, right?
Right.
Look at everything that's happening politically, right? Everything is now anti-woke. Right?
Is running.
Everything, that's his entire presidential campaign, everything, right?
They don't even know what woke means.
At all.
So
but they dispute it.
But they want to be anti-woke so bad.
This is my point.
Word was and why.
Critical race theory.
Right.
Everything has been 5 steps back. We're going to snatch these books up out of these schools. These things that we are trying to educate so we have a better understanding of Black history, what is your culture, what is your heritage, and to find pride and acceptance in who you are as a Black woman or a Black man. And everything they're trying to do is to strip us of that opportunity. And then we wonder how he was able to fall prey.
But this isn't new.
Well, that's my point. Christianity has been this forever. It's been a conquering religion. Like, that's just what it is, okay? They went to war in the Holy Land. They used Christianity to approve slavery. They wrote a letter to the Catholic Church, and he said, yes, it's okay. So I'm going, because this is the history of it. So when we sit here and we talk about how did this happen, this is their ish. This is what they do. So that's why when I read this book, for me, the beauty of it is, as a person who struggled and fight Christianity and try to understand what is my faith, I struggle with it because all the stuff y'all talking about, I know y'all taught certain black men how to read certain passages from the Bible that talk about love your master.
Right.
And that's it. You used it as a weapon to enslave and rape people. That's the real stuff. And we're wondering, again, how do you fall prey?
I do, and that's my thing. Like, I still wonder how you fall because you should know all of that.
But we're not. But that's the thing. I get it.
Because this is years.
We can sit here and say you shouldn't, but not everyone has that knowledge. Not everyone is taught that as a culture. You talked about it. Your family, seeing your sisters come back with this pride and appreciation for blackness. That's a culture that's in your family. If your family doesn't have that culture, then you're lost.
I think my struggle too is that he was right in the height of the woke culture, right? Like, this is when it became a thing to be woke and know all of these things about what it means to be black, right? Like, he tells the story about Trayvon Martin and not wanting to be a part of it. And I agree with you, right? Like, not every black person engaged, but not to deal with it for yourself and talk about that experience and completely ignore it and continue to run after the acceptance of white people was my struggle.
It's one thing to disengage.
But what was he being taught? He was taught Jesus does not see color.
Okay, but
Trayvon
did his mom teach him that?
Well,
so that
he just said church teaches.
But see, okay,
colorblindness.
I grew up in the church too. I'm a southern black dude, Alabama. Went to high school, mostly white people. I literally this is my struggle with that question in and of itself. Like, I'm my 40, I'll be 44 tomorrow.
Come on.
Give me a shot.
Water.
My 18-year-old self did not have the wherewithal to think that thoroughly about the way the black church or Christianity was impressing upon me certain things. And I'm somebody who was being groomed in church to become a pastor. Like, my pastor saw something in me. All of a sudden, I'm the youth leader of everything in my church. I'm there on the days when the adults are there. I'm a part of meetings. I'm in it. I get to speak in church. Second Sunday was my Sunday. I ran the service. I got to do all that stuff.
That's Panama.
So that, yeah. When I'm talking about she is so dumbfounded. Like, I don't know how. But I'm in school. I'm track. So I'm also in me and one of my boys are the only black kids in all the smart kid classes, right? My parents weren't giving me black books to read. In fact, I thought about that actually when y'all were talking. And then my first black book did not come from a white man after college, but I went to a white high school. I feel like I read Their Eyes Are Watching God in high school, but I might be making that up.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible.
I don't think I read any of
I
them.
read White Band. I read Anthem.
Me too.
I read all of the books that you're supposed to read.
James Faulkner.
Me too.
I didn't read
Jack
it.
London books and all that stuff.
Probably read it in ninth grade.
I didn't.
I
didn't read no black books.
I might have, but I'm kind of wondering, like, I was in like the AP and all the honors.
That's why you read them.
But
my friends and regulars didn't read it.
He was in the
white school though.
I'm from Wellington.
They thought what?
Yeah, so
You don't get no whiter than
my point is this.
No,
Like,
I was trying to figure out who had the
I
least.
I'll let you have it. Like, but when I got to a space where I remember when I got to, so I went to Morehouse to get to college, and I remember there were groups trying to get people to come to their churches and stuff like that. There was a lot of that. And I could spot stuff that I just didn't trust immediately. Like, nah, that don't even feel right. That doesn't seem right. I wasn't susceptible to any of that stuff. And it wasn't because my parents instilled in me any specific thing. Like, maybe just osmosis. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But my own sense of self at that point maybe was more developed than I give it credit for. But I didn't have anything that I was like seeking out. I did become an avid reader when I got to college. I started questioning everything. But that almost runs counter to being having a strong sense of self, right? Like, I went to my first. They required us all to take like this black history, specific black history class. And I remember that was my first time hearing about all these African cultures and stuff like that. I was like, man, who am I? Like that kind of thing. So I started, but that didn't there was no void that I was looking to fill that with either. It was like, let me just go read all this stuff so I can go be mad, extra mad at white people, which is what happened. I got more pissed at whiteness, right? So it's like, the vultures is the reason why I bring this up is because, like, my grown self thinks about the Black church that way and all of the failures of the church and the way that we don't do X, Y, Z. But like my youthfulness was just like, I go to church, Jesus this, blah, blah, blah. I'm in a room full of Black people. We singing these Black ass songs. We doing all that stuff. This is just we do. I'm here for 4 hours on Sunday, 6 hours on Easter. You know, like there's just a whatever. But I know there were people who were susceptible to that type of stuff so my point is, let me just shorten this, is that I think the vultures, whatever, they saw something in him to let them know that this is one of them that we can get.
Yeah.
We can get them. And to me, honestly, this book is emblematic of that susceptibility because while I'm reading what I said earlier was that I can see all the influences from all these other people being pushed into it, trying to deliver the same thing that all the influences have delivered in terms of the profoundness of whatever the statements. Like, I remember there's a certain chapter I was just going through. It's like, man, this dude is literally going for it every sentence. He's trying to write that Baldwin-esque thing that somebody can quote 40 years from now and say that man Danté Stewart was one of the leading thinkers of whatever because of this right here. Which to me, honestly, I think that jives with susceptibility. Something like you read these things, you discover all these books from all these people that move you, and then you become a writer. And now let me deliver everything that I have taken in. Let me give it back because this is the book that I'm writing. I'm shouting in the fire, right? I'm telling my stories, but I need to essentially let everybody know that the white supremacy, here's what it did to me, but here's what it does to us all. And here's how I got out of it eventually. But the execution of it is where I lost the compellingness, right? Like I did it from that susceptibility. I think the Christianity, the Black church part, definitely a conversation everybody needs to have. I feel like that comes on the back end of it. Like, I don't think that's what did it at first. It's not, to me, it's not like they had a very solid grounding in the Black church, the family and everything. Like, that's why I was so surprised when we got here to begin with. Like, get to the point where this movie written.
And you know what? And to add to what he was saying, I think the difference is that, you know, how you in the Black church, and like now he said, I think at that age, I wasn't conscious enough to know the harm that it could have been doing to people, right? I think the difference for him is that he ended up going to Clemson, a majority white school compared to Morehouse or a Black college. We don't explain that because the vultures, like those, like for me when I was at Tuskegee, you had the church folks, right? And everybody Black. It wasn't no evangelicals.
But I went to Rutgers University, so everybody was mostly white, right? The Black population is 8%, and so I hear everything you're saying, right? I respect it. But I think the thing that I struggle with the most, and this is why I'm still trying to figure out how to connect to him, is you grew up in a Black church. I was surprised you didn't go to church and say, this ain't how my church does it, right? That's not how this works. Exactly, like, this ain't how my church says it, right? I was surprised you didn't walk in and say it. So you can go to a mostly white university. I remember going to a white church and being like, this is not me. And going to go find the Black church and be a part of that Black church, right? So I think that was my question. Like, how did you not go? I was even as a student, when they come from like I don't know, you walk past this like a 65,000 people, right? And the book was particularly in my neighborhood, still in the dynasty. Walk. I mean, it's not like a white school. football players. The first thing that comes to my mind is the time that I was on the school, I'm just you know, nowhere to be found, right? And for me, I think I'm the new at the end of white girls who was always around white people, and I was always so confused. Right? Granted, represents some mostly white schools, right? But I don't know I don't know the experience of a football player, right? And I think that's the part that I'm missing, and I'm just like, how did that happen? Now that you brought that piece in, that was the piece that I
when you read Bo Jackson book, he talked about the heart. He said that all the football, all the people, they live in their own door, right? So he said, he was a harbor, there was a lot of racism and racism going on, and that's why Bo Jackson was in the bubble. And he said the other black people, like, why you ain't, you know, they said had the Confederate people, he said they would do a reenactment march on campus every year when he was there, some white supremacy, right? And he said because all the athletes live in the door, right? He said black folks, why you want to be around people? No, he even ate in the this dude in the book he talks about him being with his friend. There's on the football team and how they remember the lights. Like she said, you walk in the stadium and you're God and that whole world. So he felt like he liked that and he kept trying to chase and get it, which made him susceptible to these people because he go to that church and he did. You God. You must think.
And to talk about this book and the power that they have on campus, right? So he was a walk-on. A booster can get you in the field. That much I can promise you. A booster can get you in the field. A booster rock with you hard enough. They can get you in the field. You have to get you every trainer. They talk to the coach. We have actual access to coaching staff. A booster can get you in the field. So it's a different.
I think
it's a different world.
I think there's a lot of exposure to exploitation.
Yes.
And I think that's part of what made me sad.
Yeah.
And it was hard to read at different points because you see how much Black people, and in this case, Black athletic men, are exploited for their bodies, right? And even in the church context, he's exploited not for his physical body as much as like being the token nigger, right? Like for this group of people. And it's interesting, my dad passed a long time ago, but my mom and I talk sometimes about the ways in which he was exploited as an athlete, as a smart Black man who was just actually really searching for something. He was really searching for a level of fulfillment, and he thought that these white conservatives, evangelicals, were offering something to him that it seems like he had been searching from since childhood. Right? And I regret the choices that my dad made in trying to fulfill some of that. And that's also why I appreciate Dante's honestness about, like when he talked about going back to childhood, he talks about some homophobia that he had because he wasn't masculine enough. So other boys beat him up, or maybe they didn't even beat him up. Maybe they just said stuff to him, and he beat another boy up. Thank you. Listen. And so I appreciate it. I think he was very vulnerable, and I appreciate him exposing his imperfection, his sins, even like the way he was didn't treat his wife in the way that he should, the way he was disrespectful to his mama. I think that's really great.
And you know what? And today, and to do that today, in the times that we're living and everybody wearing their Black Books Matter shirts, for him to do that today, it is a level of vulnerability.
It's so
because right now I was looking at him
like that isn't even the problem. Look, when we read books that we try to connect to or that we find compelling, it's usually because there's some level of that to it, right? Like that's usually the reason why probably every book we read in here that's been like moving is because it has some of that, or at least something that's personal, like that's not just a novel or whatever. It's just that what your vulnerability is exposing is just hard to read.
Yes, I
agree. It's difficult, right?
Totally
because I'm looking at this just like, I mean, somebody said earlier how it's dangerous.
So dangerous.
This could be fucking Kanye West story, right? Like this could literally be the story of somebody who searching for something gets lost,
Yeah.
but has all the power in the world to impact. That's why when Kanye lost his mind,
Don't get me started.
people like me were writing all the think pieces about how dangerous it is. And people are arguing like, bro, y'all giving Kanye too much credit. Maybe, but the problem is you really don't know. You don't know how many people are following or paying attention to this and becoming and like allowing this person to be used to do X, Y, Z, which is what happened here, right? Falls in with a certain group of people, they allow him to become a mouthpiece. We go teach in these schools. We can use you to be the black face, the black male in this space to connect these other black boys in here and do all these things. Like you become like that person. So vulnerable 100%. It was just hard, like for me, aside from my lack of love for just like the actual writing of it, but whatever.
Yeah,
the painfulness in reading this for me, like the constant talking about the pain to black bodies and all this stuff. It's like I feel like it was the overkill of that, which is why I said the black pain was hard. It was like there was a point where I think an editor could have pulled. The editor clearly left out the name of some organizations that were in there getting to that man, right? Some of that stuff got left out on purpose, but some of the stuff was just left in. It was like, bro, this is like 500 words of black bodies, black bodies, black bodies, black bodies. Too much, because that's a word that I started to notice. Like, you know, you have like trigger words at some point. Like I started to get triggered by it listening to it. And I did the audiobook after I stopped actually reading it. And I started to get triggered by the word bodies. I'm like fucking, he says bodies one more time. Like I'm really gonna lose it because it's like
one page he said it like it was literally
it was just like that.
I think he's poetic as well, and I think he's Pentecostal. I do think I'm not saying he's Pentecostal, but I think that comes.
So there was a space where that works, but that when I said performative earlier, and I didn't mean in the way that I said it then, I didn't mean inauthentic. I mean like the book was written to perform. Like it was written in a way that could be performed.
To preach.
Yeah, like he can come stand here.
To preach it.
You ever go to like book readings and that joint is just like, like, bro, get to the end of this shit so we can just get to talk. But this is something because and he delivered it like you listening to it. It was read even in the audiobook like a performance, like an actual like whatever. So that's what I meant by performative. So to some degree that makes sense, but also because of what he's talking about, like unless it is a sermon about the pain of black body, the pain of black body suffer, whatever. To me, it got to be too much, and that's where I tuned out. I'm just like, this is a labor now. This is a chore because this is literally talking about something that I lived through directly, was actively involved in my own way, and I'm not saying we moved on, but what I am saying is that I'm being forced to relive this, but like by somebody who seems to have just discovered this shit.
Right.
It's now just
it felt real fresh from him. It's new for him.
Because of that interaction with it, it was hard for me as somebody who is like not desensitized, but kind of like, all right, this is my reality. But now I'm being reintroduced by somebody who's
new to it.
It's not a zealot, but you know, like that kind of has that feel to it.
You know, but I think, and I'm going back to your comment, Z, what you're saying. It's like it feels like, again, there are books you read for certain parts of your life, right? There are books for some people. This is not one that necessarily may add to you based on your experience, based on your self-esteem level, right? Based on your maturity. This is not the book for you. But for a person who is new, who is young, trying to find out who they are and discover themselves, right? And that is a person who is like, okay, I can feel it. I am more in it, right? Certain books you read as an adult, like our kids' books.
Well, they have to finish it. That person has to finish this book in order to, because if they read the first 100 pages, they're gonna be like, "This is exactly what I thought."
But I think that's the person who sticks with it even more so, because there's more of a emotional connection to it. I think there's more.
I think there's an audience for it. I do.
For it, I definitely think that. Yeah.
So, and I think you know, part of like, so even when we had these conversations, a lot of times I found that we get to the place at the conversation where we start to like distinguish who the book is for, like who edited it, why did they write it, who's the audience. I don't think this book is for everybody, right? I think as a new person coming into Black consciousness, learning about who they are, especially if they are a Christian male, and their surroundings have mostly been encased in whiteness, is trying to now unearth all of that with a religious lens, right? I think that's the kind of person who will pick up this book and just be like, boom, I've been needing this book, right? So I think that really sits with me. That
Now, one thing I will say that I was happy about, oddly, is that for once, a Black person is getting paid for their woke story. Because let me tell you what I'm sick of. White people's story about how I was once racist, and now I'm
free.
anti-racist, and they're doing speaking circuits, and they're making money off this being anti-racism, and they are making that coin. So I was like, I'm not mad at it.
Good for him.
That finally a Black person is making money off of this storage of coming through that, and I'm on this other side of being woke now or conscious or whatever, and I'm getting paid for my process, because I struggle with white people and anti-racism all the time, because it's I'm glad you're anti-racist, but you don't get to do it for free, right? Tim Wise, if actually coming here and talk, you're gonna be like, he's not coming here to talk for free. So yeah, you guys say some profound things and cool things, and people are like, yay, Tim, but Tim don't work, you don't do shit for free. So Tim became very wealthy in his anti-racismness. And so me myself was like, it's about time.
Do you think there's a lot of people? So in talking about who this book is for, right? There's an audience of people who struggle with their identity, perhaps in Christianity or whatever, who, I guess I'm trying to figure out how you would get this book into the hands of people who have a similar, maybe not similar, but a story that could somehow stand in as a proxy for their own life, right? Because I think, this is kind of a redemption story, right? And it's, but
then wouldn't it be at church? Aren't those people at church?
No.
So exactly, but that's kind of my point. Most of the people in this space they're not coming out of that, right? That's so it's
they might throw your book away.
Most people are sitting in that because they want to be there. They're not really coming out of it. This is like all the people that come out of Scientology and shit and then do interviews, right? You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. But that's not a huge audience. You know what I'm saying? That's not there's not a ton of people
I love those documentaries.
that do that stuff. But it's so the question is so people like us reading this and we find some anger, some visceral reaction to some of this stuff, because it's why didn't you know better is kind of where I sit with it. Maybe that's unfair, but that is where that's where I'm at with it, right? That's where I'm at. So, but the people who probably need it the most are probably. I don't know if they're as far
I just
gone
don't
to
feel
see
like
it
they're
is.
picking up the book.
But is it that they need it the most, or is this written for who he was? The people that need this story the most aren't getting it because they're still sitting in it. But I think there's people that do, or that may need this validation that came.
Yeah, because white Christians probably hate this book.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm thinking, you're talking about an audience. I'm thinking, okay, so you remember when George Floyd and everybody seemed to wake up, right? I'm thinking there probably was some Black folks that woke up too.
Yeah,
all of a sudden, oh my God! You see what I'm saying? You had some Black folks that woke up too, some young ones that they've been hanging with their little white friends, and they're all good. And you realize they saying behind your back. So I'm thinking that may be their audience. An educated kid that went to a white college, they think they all them your friends. You ain't been stopped by the cops yet,
right?
But you starting to feel it. You know something ain't right. You getting that might be for them. They college educated. They went to Clemson. They in that bubble. But the bubble gonna bust eventually, and you gonna get the awakening. So I'm thinking maybe this is that audience.
I'm thinking. So it's easy for me to answer that question because people come in here asking for books, right? And there are people who are Christian who will steer away from certain books and certain topics, right? So it has to be in a certain lane for them. But you also have people who are trying to figure out, well, I'm new to reading Black books. I'm new to reading about us. That is something that we hear so much so as we're creating bundles for people who are new to reading about Black consciousness.
Yeah.
That is an actual thing.
You put this book in a
And that's what I was saying.
I will put this into that.
I don't even know who I'd recommend this book to.
Right.
Grinch, I didn't enjoy it, so it's hard.
Panama is like I'm just thinking your circle of
It's
people
different.
is vastly different from who the people are who are looking for.
That's
I'm just
fair.
wondering who his people are. That's what I'm trying
People-
to
Who
You know what?
was it for you?
You know
How
what?
did you
I
end
wanna
up to
know-
not be him? You went to the white schools. Your parents had this.
I think my
rhetoric.
experience was different because I was seeking blackness, right? And
Yeah,
so
it's
for a
different.
population in my school to be so small, I had to find it, right? And so for me, it was really important to be around Black people. So that's why it was different for me.
Were you rebelling against your parents? Why were you seeking blackness when they were teaching you not to be Black?
Why was I seeking it?
Yeah.
Because, that's a good question. I think it was really about rebelling against my parents because I used to be a part of the West Indian Society at that time, right? So I joined the West Indian Society, and I think there was this division between being a first generation from somewhere, like, oh, your parents are from Africa or Nigeria or Ghana, or your parents are from Grenada or Trinidad, right? And being Black. And I remember someone standing up and saying, at the end of the day, your boat went this way and my boat went that way. And we're still the same people and we're still treated the same way. And I remember those words so, I still remember the girl. I follow her on Instagram, love her dearly. We became great friends. And those words changed my entire life, right? And so for me, I was like, you're right. Why it was this big division of thing. Why did I allow my parents? And that's when I started to seek blackness.
Did you feel accepted by the white people that you were friends with
Yeah.
and grew up with?
Yeah. I mean, at that time, and it wasn't until I got to college that I realized I wasn't, right?
Yeah.
That you went back and you were like, oh, wow. I still remember some of the conversations that I had, and I was like, oh, these people really didn't fuck with me like that.
And that's
why you gotta have your kids.
That's
Oh no, I'm dead ass.
Let me say, they're heartbreaking when you think back on it, because I'm seeing these kids that I'm working with, and they rocking with these kids, and I'm wondering, and I'm seeing that from adults, these folks ain't rocking with you like you think they are,
Mhm.
but the kids can't see.
But
I'm saying,
that's-
how does that feel now for you to
That
know that they weren't rocking with you like you thought?
I mean, it doesn't faze me. That's probably why I went into education, right? I think that's why education became so my trajectory wasn't to go to be a teacher and become an assistant principal and all these things, but I cared so much about teaching Black students because I didn't want them to. I think that's why the book was so hard for me, because I had that self-hatred, right? I knew what it felt like to sit there and not want to be Black, right? And not, because you lived in a community where Black boys, I didn't even know Black boys like Black girls until I got to college, right? And so for me, it was just really, I think it was going back to that space that I've worked so hard to get away from, that I think that's why I was so angry with him, because you didn't grow up. Yeah, you didn't grow up the way that I grew up. So how did you get to this space?
But I think that's his point around the books. And I say that because my parents are immigrants, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, my parents, they're from West Africa, but my dad and mom really weren't like that. Like from jump, they were like, clear, you're Black. I want you to understand that you are Black, just like these other Black people. All y'all are Black. But they couldn't teach me what it meant to be like Black American.
Right.
They're like, we're raising in this place. I don't know anything about it. I'm trying to figure out how to be an immigrant and like navigate being a Black immigrant.
Mm-hmm.
So they knew nothing else to do but to give me books. From when I was like 6, there was this book that was called the Black Legacy Collection. I'll never forget. I cannot find it, that my dad bought me. That was like these like developmentally appropriate like things around like Blackness. And so like the white kids and even though I grew up in a white community, I went to my parents didn't want me to go to public school. So I went to private school. I was the only Black kid in my entire school. Even though I lived in a Black neighborhood, I went to a private school. I wasn't going for none of it. I remember I refused to do the Thanksgiving like feather thing, because I was like, white people actually, Thanksgiving is not a happy day for Indians. They don't like it.
Right. Yes, that was me.
Right now, my name was like, but did she lie? Like, right? So like, but the thing about it is that the conversation I was having was reading these books. I was having conversations, I was doing a conversation, right? But I'm like reading them and I'm asking questions. My parents answer kind of like surface level, right? But it was just like more and more and more and more. If I had nothing, I had information. I didn't necessarily have nuance, but I definitely had facts and information, to where growing up in a white community, I never thought my white friends were for me. And when they asked me stupid questions like, why don't you wash your hair every day? Why you should wash your hair twice a day, because your hair is dirty. Right? Why do you get lice checks?
And I'm opposite. Like I still think back to the time where I went with a couple of girlfriends and a teacher, And I remember them all sitting there and asking me all these questions about Black people. And one of the things was, why do Black people go to the beach? And I remember like laughing it off at that time, right? And I often look back at it.
Oh, the disrespect. I just thought it.
Yeah, and I
You can't swim.
well, because in their mind, like white people go to the beach to tan, and you're already dark. So why are you going to the beach? And so in that time, I'm laughing and all. I'm like, because we like to go to the beach too. But now, college Janae was so angry that she didn't respond, and like you laughed it off.
Yeah.
That's not a funny thing to laugh off back then. I can appreciate that you had that knowledge that I didn't get the chance to experience until I got to college. Now, at this point, I look back at those people and it's like, girl, if I ever see you again, I'm gonna read you for free. I want to go back to this conversation.
It's funny because I'm happy you said that. I'm working in my school where, you know, it's like a lot of, you know, the Black kids are laughing at the stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And now that makes sense to me because I'm thinking I had to call one in the day. I'm like, they're calling you all these names, and you're why are you
laughing?
So he was like, well, it's funny to me. I said, okay, but you know that you're being disrespected, right? And I said, and he said, well, Mama told me don't worry about what people say. You don't worry about what people say about you, but you don't be disrespected. Mm-hmm. It's hard to teach kids that when they trying to be in that world real hard, and they're like, and I'm like, but they calling you these crazy names. He was like, but it's really hard. I have to keep having the conversation over and over again with Black kids about white kids and Hispanics doing it to them, and they're laughing.
Mm-hmm. So here's my question:
but it's the whole thing in.
Are you prepared to deal with them knowing?
Knowing what?
Yes, because they're gonna.
Are you prepared to deal with them knowing? Because like, there's something about
knowing what?
Yeah.
About knowing
that they're outside. Yes.
And they're outside all the time because. When you think about some of it,
but
it's protective. It's like
it is protective. But this is the deal, though. Like now at this school, when I looked at the numbers, because it feels 100% white. When I looked at the numbers, it really ain't. It's like 45% white. So it's more minority. My point is that I'm trying to get them, if they can, get with your people, because there are Black kids in that school.
But when I think back about me and my sister, and I went to Howard, she went to GW, and this is the same sister. And I'm like, Daddy, you know. Her innocence, like when you say, are you prepared for them to know? Her innocence, I wonder if that helped her. Because I went to, my parents tried to put us both in private school. I didn't answer one question on that test. I was in AP classes and all sorts of shit. But I failed the test. And I'm like, she's smart, I promise. But my sister, she went to school. Ken Nicole's daughter stole her calculator. My dad couldn't even afford to buy her another one. And this rich little girl stole my sister's $80 calculator. And that was like a huge thing. Right? To your point about what are you prepared for them to know, I wonder if her innocence almost like helped her. Because I'm sitting in the classes and I remember grew up in the suburbs, and most of the white people sent their kids to private school. So my high school, even though I'm in the suburbs and it's a lot of white people, my high school is all Black. I was one of two in all my AP classes. All my AP classes were white. Mm-hmm. And it's like how in this 90% Black high school, and there's 2 Black kids in every single AP class I'm in. Yeah. And I remember one time I got in trouble. My white teacher told a story of how a homeless man grabbed him or hit him or grabbed him or was rude to him or something, and he punched him. And I asked, was he Black? And he's like, well, that has nothing to do with it. And I'm like, you wouldn't have hit a white homeless man the way you laid this Black man out. And you surely wouldn't be bragging about it all these years later. And I got in trouble for saying that in my white AP class, because it's like, how dare I bring race into this story that wasn't about race? But how dare you tell your story?
No, it was about for him. Right, you can't identify to him.
Right.
Call it out that what he know was about race.
But also, you told your students a story about you punching someone. Nobody cares.
Man. Right, exactly. Right, but I get in trouble. Right, exactly.
About punching, about laying somebody out.
Classism.
Nobody
cares.
It's just, but I feel like but I feel like my anger in those settings almost put me back, right? And I mean, not necessarily because I'm still successful and everything worked out fine. But I do think that had I not had that anger at an early age, or had I navigated things differently.
So I'm thinking about telling a story about my kid, right? And what I would say to that is I would prefer for them to know.
Right.
Same.
I don't want your bubble to be popped too late in life.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I agree.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I think that now you can choose. So my kid is graduating 4.4 GPA.
Okay.
Right? Has learned 9-10 different instruments.
Ooh.
Orchestra, band,
Genius over there.
Yeah.
everything they do, right? Majority of people around them is white,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just because of their interests and what, we, for some reason, orchestra is a white kid thing.
It's
That
expensive.
they do. Well,
Yeah.
right? The lessons and all that stuff, that's why it's not. So anyway, it's
Black
more
people,
utopianism for you, but you don't see in Southeast DC or PG County these music stores that are selling instruments or selling lessons for violin and the bass. I mean, like the big, not guitar bass, but harp. These are the things that they're doing at their school. And my point is that they can choose to be around who they want to be with. We have no problem with it. Our interaction is, you know who you are.
That's most
And if someone steps out of line,
you check them.
you
So
check,
check them. Yeah.
right? And you check them to a place where you're not hurt,
Right.
right? I remember teaching giving my nephew a book. He was out there, one of the corners selling water, and a white man called him a nigger, right? So I was like, okay, as your uncle, I can't be there because I would have knocked the guy out, right? But you need to understand what that word is, why they use it, so that you can take the power out of it, right? So that if you come to me, you trying to limit my humanity when you are the most inhumane person. It's your heritage.
Mm-hmm.
You have ancestors who intentionally breeded people.
Yeah.
How am I?
Right. I'm a savage.
Right, like
Like,
Who's
you
that?
right.
Y'all uncivilized.
Y'all rape and eat people. Y'all crazy.
You weird.
what are we really talking about?
And the researchers showed they were saying that white kids know about race from like kindergarten. As soon as they get to school, you the slow one, black kids, they know that. So my thing about it is that when you ask, when do they need to know? Yeah, they need to know.
I meant in the school setting.
Yes, in the school setting. They were saying the school setting.
I'm talking for the administrator. You're an administrator at the school, and you stepping in to like intercede that way. I was just saying, like, I meant like in math, are you prepared for them to know, like, not this one?
Oh, but I am. Like now, my role is DEI. Last
the
week
system able to
we were talking about bad words in the white parent.
because if a bunch of black kids know, because I'll never forget at school, they had African American history. He showed Rosewood. We had a white African American history teacher.
Not
That was Wellington.
A white person.
Rosewood.
And I'm from Wellington. Look it up. So, so his name was Mr. Wyatt Pothane.
Oh my God, that's my family's name.
So he, and now mind you, of course, African
How many
American
black
history
people were in
class,
the class?
like 35, all the black kids, right? Because it's like this African American history class.
White
We're like,
man,
oh,
so
we're gonna take African American history class.
Weird.
So we take the class. I never forget. We sat in class. This man showed us Rosewood. And I was on block scheduling, so it's a 100-minute class, and you watch the whole movie in
That's
one
sick.
class.
This is terrible.
We watched Rosewood, and basically the movie ended right before the bell rang. The bell rang. Nobody moved.
Because you're sick.
And he looked at us like, I'll never forget. God bless Willard. He looked at me. He was like, "You want us to go out there?" Because like it was like the bell rang, and it was like it's like all the white kids just walking around. Like, you can't go out there because nobody moved. Everybody was like,
So that's
"Where are you sending me?"
I felt Rosewood about this book.
This is why
That's all.
education, we are teaching it the wrong way, right? But it needs to be taught, and that needs to be a 2 hour or 2.5, whatever it is, hour class. Now here's the conversation, right?
Have you watched Rosewood before?
I don't know, child, but he
Probably not.
He watched
He was like,
Rosewood.
"There's a bad." He Googled it.
Don't talk about that.
Oh, it's about that
That's
massacre of
the most movie I've ever watched in my life.
I went to watch one on a Sunday I went to Sweden and I think my best friend was a white kid.
Down and killed.
I ain't somebody's ass on the bus.
And the thing is,
To make it worse, we're in Florida. Like, we're Floridian. So we're in Florida. We're in Florida watching a movie about the obliteration of a Florida city that's like 2 hours away. It's like,
I have to go, but let me just say, this is why I love this place, because we had an amazing conversation from a terrible book. And
Oh my God.
I just love coming here.
It's always
Yeah.
I told you.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have, we have 10 minutes left anyway. But so let's.
You know
can you
what?
do a charge and challenge to invite maybe like a black pastor or somebody to come? Because I really want this like conversation to happen, and somebody's black church to have, because we need to sit down with millennial, Gen Z, Christian and non-Christians, because they need to be able to say why they don't mess with it, and we need to be able to hear
So
it.
you know what? It's funny you
And
say
like,
that because
deal with it, because
and I'm not sure if you read it have it. Like after anybody listen to After Street Baptist Church, y'all be listening to Wesley.
Yes.
You hear him. So he do a lot of that stuff, and I think like he talked about submission. He talked about the fact that it's from the Old Testament. That a lot of that stuff is obsolete. It was almost like when men own women, like they own cattle. So he do a lot of those conversations. But I wonder with him, you know, how much is that turning off his, you know, that's a historically black church.
Yeah.
Been here forever. I wonder how much is that turning off his older congregation, which is pretty much down out of that church. I mean,
Very young. They
Right.
young people.
Right. And now they're catering because of him, but that church I went there before he got there, everybody was old, 100 years old. So I'm just wondering how was that playing out, because he is having those conversations about the church and gayness.
I'm curious, when you talk to him for your podcast, I mean, that's one of the questions, like, what has been the reception by the Christian community? Like, and if you know the black or white parts of those communities, I mean, I would imagine, like, and I did not finish, so it's entirely possible that he explains what that stepping out of the reformist or whatever evangelical part, what that was like, or how that has been received. But I'd be very curious, because he was somebody in that space to a degree, right? So I'd be very curious what that was like for him, what that reception has been for him in those spaces, because I can imagine if you're a black Christian, you wouldn't love this book. You'd be like, yeah, I don't know, like the critiques that are there are not. I don't know.
You would. No, I think I think in part it's a love letter to black churches, because towards the end, what he's talking about is reclaiming his Pentecostal heritage, right? That I strayed and I lost connection with my elders.
not the prodigal son.
I strayed,
Not the prodigal son.
story.
that he had to reclaim, like he, again, to his language, you know, he talks about like his grandmother, right? And his grandfather who has been, he talks about talking to his elders, to the patriarchs, monarchs of his family, and talking about like their hard hands, talking about like all these things that are the basis, the foundation, again, the culture of his family is rooted deeply into who he is. And that now he's getting back to that and appreciating, even as, I don't have the word, like lo-fi as it is, right? As low, I don't say quality, but like as analog as it is compared to like the digital world. This is what centers me and grounds me. Like, and that's as you get to the end, that's what he's really.
I feel like that gotta be marketed that way,
So
bro.
Derek,
This is marketed to me as the sunken place. I stepped out of it, and here is my journey through that. Because I feel like if this is painted as a love letter to the black church, I read it different. I genuinely feel like my perspective. Now, I don't know that I finished. I still, like, my issues were very much page to page, but I think that I look at it as a different type of book, as opposed to, like, I'm genuinely reading this like, how the hell did my man fall into the sunken place, stay there actively, fight with everybody about the fact that he was in the sunken place, and eventually comes out of it.
And where is he now? Like, is he in black churches now? You on your own? You being independent?
I know he's got into, I think, a
He's
Pentecostal
a pastor now. He's gone
through seminary school done.
Yeah.
Is it?
He's finished seminary? He's finished.
Yeah.
He got a church. Is it a black church?
He's an associate pastor.
She just
He's not a-
graduated.
Yeah, he's not.
Because this is what I'm wondering too. Those evangelicals that he was with, I would love for them to read this book. Like they need to know.
They're not gonna read it.
Well,
But they love him. They love him.
Somebody
They-
did. Somebody
they
in
read it.
his journey is definitely
Because
there.
check this out. They probably
They
think
got
that he's
the
writing
first
about
book.
them. They don't know he didn't with black.
Oh, he's
so they see it. He posts about it all the time.
So you think? Yeah, and they know. I bet they, and they need
I'm
to
sure
read it.
someone can watch it. No.
Right, but they're not finishing the book.
I'm not seeing a sprinkle of
Neither
them.
did I.
I bet they're reading because it's him, and they don't.
Well,
know
they're not getting past it
Then
because
they
they're
get
get
like, oh
stuck
my
in themselves
god.
being centered. Like she's talking bad about us. They're not gonna finish it because they're gonna center
Yeah.
themselves.
When you talk, see that bro, is this a love letter to the black
No.
church? Because then he can say, hey, yes it is. And then he can use that because if, again, with you saying that, I'm like, okay, perhaps I do think there's the I'm gonna do like the indictment of like the black church and stuff like, because he got there somehow he walked clean out the black church and walked right to the white folks. Right, he did that like eyes wide. Well, I guess his eyes were shut, but
I think it's how
What I love and appreciate about Dante, right? And again, and this may be again from where I am as a person, right? Ramona knows I struggle with the institution of Christianity. I struggle with the institution of church.
Same.
Right? And what I appreciate about Dante is that he is clear and open about I'm not perfect. We're not perfect. I'm just trying to be my absolute best. And that I can appreciate, right? Because when we put up these false personas of being perfect, like we know it's not. So for me, when I read it, I can be okay with a lot of the the black pain of it, because ultimately I see it, and my words is it's a love letter because I see where he's coming, where he's trying to get to, and recognizing, you know what, at this dirt, this red clay, this where I'm from is okay. I can be okay with myself, right? And that I appreciate. So I won't say that
also
everyone.
even maybe safe. That the red clay is safe because it hadn't been a safe place, and so he was trying to find a safe place, and to be able to come back and say this was actually always my safe place.
And then
I
Derek
love
at the end he
his
talks
gentleman.
about when they said they said something about him being gay or something, and he didn't like it. So
His
I'm
brother.
wondering how is he reconciled? Like when you're saying I'm welcoming myself back, you can't. You know it's problematic because he talked about them saying something about him not being gay or that problematic of the church. So you're saying I don't know if he's being welcomed home because the home that he thought it was is not what he.
I think,
No,
but
he was
I think
focusing on
also
the
into a
kids.
different church. Like so for me, I'm very clear. Like us trying to, there are certain people I can like go to church with, right? Like because it's problematic. And so to me, like I think this is the question also, is like the type of church you go to now. Like I told him when we come down there, I will be, and again, this is me, whether I will be open to going to his church and hearing him, and because I think he's found a safe space where he can be. And I think for most people, that's why the church registry is going down, because they don't necessarily see it as a safe space. They don't see themselves there. They don't. It's too manipulative sometimes. It's about the money. Like it's all these things, and they just want to go somewhere where I am in pain. I need to pray. I need someone to be there for me. That's what they need, and he's found that. And I think again, being able to go through that process and be open and honest with yourself, and try to find it, fail, recognize that you are problematic for your wife and for the Black community writ large, and be able to look yourself in the mirror, write a story about it, put it out there for everyone to witness and to read, and still be able to walk in that and continue to try to be better. To me, that's that is the story for me. That's what I take out of it. So that's why I say it's that love letter. It's because it's you being able to ultimately be able to look in the mirror and be perfectly okay and satisfied with who you are. For me, that's what God is, right? That you being able to be, I made you imperfect, love yourself, love your neighbor in their imperfectness. That's why it's ridiculous, these white folk in Christianity, because they don't love people in their imperfectness.
They don't love themselves.
They
They don't love
do
themselves.
it.
That's why they're moving face to face. They won't do this
They won't do
because they can't love themselves in imperfection.
Right. And that's, to me, the beauty of what religion should be. And that's why I love this. There are areas where it could be better, right? Where but I think it's also, again, I would read his next book and his next book. Because I'm interested in the evolution of Dante, the writer now, right?
It's almost kind of like when students find brackets. Like for me, like I can tell when my student like found a new like grammatical thing because they will brackets the hell. I'd be like, you just learned about brackets, huh? Like, maybe comments everywhere. Like, it's like, come on, right? That is not brackets. Are you sparing me? My God, right? So I feel like those quotes, the James, it was like this, like a very like infant, like kind of like survey. Like you ask a student to write a research paper, right, and do sources. And it's just like they oversight. It's like citation. Like, all right, I'm ready, Jesus, right? But like, because that's as far as they can go. Like that's where they are in their development, in their understanding of the material. Is just like a regurgitation of it. My thoughts more there regurgitation because that's where you are, and I think that's like you said, like as he evolves, and hopefully he gets more nuanced and is able to go deeper, so that we don't need that when we read Ta-Nehisi Coates, where it's clear that he's very well read. He's wrestled with the information. He's talked with other people. Like it's a different kind of thing around, like other than just like I just read The Fire Next Time
and it doesn't and it's talking with other people. I don't think he's had the chance to do. At least it doesn't come clear.
Or to be challenged by
I think
others.
it's different. I think him referencing Fire Next Time and James Baldwin is this realization that I can be Black and I can show up as me and I can show up in Christianity. That is not we have not been taught that. It's either you with the white Jesus and blah blah blah, or you're not. You can't have it both. So I don't know if it's this. He's kind of new in this. Oh, I discovered that I'm Black and James. I think it's a beautiful marriage. And I love that he keeps that we show up as both. We have not been taught to show up as both. We deny our Blackness. When we're over here Christian with parents with white Jesus, we are not Black. We can act like we are, but they just don't look like us.
Yeah.
And I think for him to be able to meld that and to show that is, I mean, I don't think it's infancy writing. I think it's beautiful to show that.
All of it. It was like,
you know what I mean? He's referencing all those quotes, and I think we need to see that over because we've never seen us show fully in that way. Does that make sense?
No, it doesn't. It's really just hard because, like, I think as someone who is Christian, when I deal with
I mean, look, bro, you know
Black woman, he get out on the side. Make room.
I want to pick up my food right
or you will watch it, yes.
Make room on the top seat.
We already said, come on, man.
But you know what? I want to add one thing to what Ramon. This is what. No, I thought about that. Like you said, when you're Christian and Black and intellectual or whatever, there has been a disconnect. We haven't seen that together.
That's right.
In that space where you're radically Black, and you Christian. It's hard to merge. Even like now, I love going to church and all that. Right, I haven't been since the pandemic, but I am gonna go back one day. And it almost feel you almost feel like it's like, should I be with my Christianity and then be pro? It's almost like it's your point.
And there was a point in time.
And even when I'm with Black people, like you love Lord,
as we start to have more,
I do love
the
Lord, but I'm
intellectual part of it, right, gets in the way. So I'm a psychologist, and there's always this tension with like the more Afrocentric people, and who have told me flat out at conferences that like, you're a Christian. Like, if you're Christian, you can't be for the struggle if you're a Christian. Right. The two just don't go together. If you worship the white man Jesus, that's it. And it's like, not you kicking me out the struggle. Like, tell me that I can't be part, right?
That's right.
But also because I know I understand how they got there, I always have to eat it. Like I always have to eat that kind of like response to me because I understand why they take that position. Right? They can't seem to understand why I take my position.
Right.
But I understand how they got there.
Who are radical
for me,
have to
like that's why I want the conversation in the church so we can hear how they got there. And like that ain't gonna change their minds. But like have a reckoning around how we arrived in our position.
But he had to come back.
Each position does.
I can't understand nobody black who go all the way over.
He didn't know. We all brainwashed. He was all over there.
Uh-uh.
I don't know.
So one of the first books I read that helped me, so that's one of my notes here. It's like Christianity and Black identity, right? And it also moves into like political ideology, right? And that's why we have a problem sometimes with Black Republicans, because they put their religious issues of abortion, homosexuality.
I'm concerned though. I understand this might turn some white people behind homophobia, but I'm in jail.
Right. Well, over social issues like voting rights and all these other things, right? It is a tension, right? And that's something that we do have.
Morality plays.
Right, because there's a way to be all of it, in my estimation. There's a way to be all of it. And one of the books that I absolutely love, and if you remind me of it when you talked about that duality, is the Walker Appeal.
Oh, David Walker.
David Walker's Appeal.
Mm-hmm.
This dude in the 1700s, fiercely Christian. Well, this dude was like, yo, if we got to kill people, we're going to do what we got to do. He wrote these 4 appeals
Knock if you but 1800.
to specifically incite slave revolts in the South. The reason we have the this dude smuggled in his letters into the South. As white folks figured out what was happening, part of it is your fault though. But anyway, part of it, but that's when they started writing into law these laws about not allowing Black folk the ability to read, because they were getting this material that was telling them, look, you can be Christian. As a Christian, you are not supposed to be under any man. Like all of this, but we have not learned how to merge the two identities.
We haven't.
And what we talk about, Jesus walking, he flipping stuff over. He was the biggest revolutionary. That's what our pastors talk about.
But when you're in Black spaces, you feel like you cannot be Christian.
That's a very real thing.
It's how we need to reteach it so that you can see yourself as a Christian, also as a revolutionary, and be comfortable in your Black identity.
Because a lot of things that were said tonight for me were very problematic when we were talking about the Black church. For me here, I think we've all evolved and see some of the issues with the Black church, but I think we're diminishing for some people the place where they went to heal. Some of the places that, some of the good that it did. So it's almost like, it feels like for the Black folks that I know, and even in some parts of this conversation, we're diminishing some of the good things about the Black church. That's what it felt like. I'm not saying it is. So then for me, you sit in these spaces and you're like, oh my God. But I do believe in the Black church. I was raised in Southern Black churches. I know what it did for me now, but I'm straight. So I don't know what the gay person might have felt, which might have been a whole different experience. But for me, I just felt loved and welcome. And I went more out of habit.
Of course.
And I get to see all my friends. And we would play and, be in church together. Your whole neighborhood my whole neighborhood would go to the church. So it was more about community and your Black folks, and we had the free lunch program at the church. But my point is right here, so we're diminishing. To me, it felt like for me, the comfort I got, the home I got.
I think that's got older. Blah, blah, blah. I think the church, the thing about the Black church, again, I absolutely agree with you. I think where we've seen evolution of people falling away is because I don't think the Black church has kept up with what the needs of the people are as much anymore, right? Like,
I think we're falling off, and I hear what you're saying.
It's like that's what I
think we're falling off because we're
and not wanting. And when the young people try to pull and push, people are like, no, right?
I hear you, but I
that's-
think for us to that
That's
broad
the rub.
stroke and say that people are leaving because of your reason, I think it's so multiple reasons. I think we're becoming, and we don't want to be that person. That white supremacy, that individuality. With a lot of, you know what I'm saying? It's a lot of other things going on because Black churches are about community, whatever, right? So I think it's more than just one reason why people are going on. And it ain't all about it ain't all about oppression.
No,
you see what I'm saying? It's not all oppression.
But as somebody, so I grew up in the Black church. I have an affinity for it at the same time. But this is what I'm saying too about like looking back. Like when I went to church, I just went to church. It was because I was supposed to be there. It's what I did. It's what
Me too. It's just a habit.
But as I got older and I started thinking about some of the things that I got from church, it's like, that's interesting. Like the things that in fact, by the time I got to college, so this didn't even take me that long, I started to view some of that stuff negatively. Sure, I got community from it and I love those people that were there. But some of the things that I got from the people that were there in my community, it was like, damn, is that really what the people that are in my community who are running this Christian, like running these Christian lines but to me on Sunday, but I get to go to all the adult meetings, as I said, and I'm seeing a lot of stuff that I'm like, damn, is this what the Christians are doing? Now, as a child, it is what it was, but as I got older, my analysis of those things definitely put me in a different space, and I think that's probably what happens to a lot of people. Like, you're right. Most of us as a youth, you go to church because that's where you're supposed to go for your parents' sake. My grandma took me, blah, blah, blah. As you get older and have that individual ability to analyze things for yourself, you read more, you come into more contact with things, it's easy. Like, I am not religious. I'm not going to say I'm not religious at all. My wife would murder me. But I am, but also, she's from the colonizing settlers. She's from Ghana, right? So that's a fight.
I think we have
now, but it's like, so what I'm saying is all of the love that I have and the appreciation I have for what the Black church helped get me, I still have criticisms of what I got from being there that I think are both. They run in conflict to each other, but they're both two sides of the same coin. But it's almost
like we're saying, a lot of people are saying, just throw that away. For instance, I mean, that's what it sounds like. Let's think about it.
We're just saying the challenge in church.
No, I'm just saying, but it sounds like a lot of Black folks, when you're saying you're Christian and you church or whatever, it's almost like, ugh.
Now, a lot of Black people are.
That's what it feels like.
It's
some of that. And my point is just right here. I hear what you're saying is about the problematic, but it's almost like, and it's just me, 87-year-old mama, right? When she talks about things like that, I find that I'm able to bring her on the other side when she talks about like gay people. I'm like, Mom, that's not bad. She's able to receive at her old age that some of the things like now she don't like white folks, and I get it because her coming up is different. But she's able to hear and understand and see it a little bit different and problematic part of it, if that makes sense. So it's almost like it feels like for people who are Christian and still radical, it feels like Black folks want us to make a decision.
They do.
Well, I say that the reason
they want us to make. You don't want to make a decision because you
see the evolution of people who are spiritual. There's an evolution of people who have not understood that you can be radical and still be a Christian. So you're gonna get some people in the population like, how are you doing that? It's a white Jesus. It's a whole it's a whole breakdown, and so you are gonna get some people who look at you crazy. That you're radical and you're Christian, but the evolution is we can be that over here. Some people ain't there yet. You've gone through that transition. You've grown up, gone to vacation Bible school, and you still can be a radical. Some people ain't there yet. I see you looking at your clock, kind of, you wrong and there. But what I'm trying to say, some people haven't gotten on that journey, and I think we have to make space for them to have that journey that you've had, that we've had. Everybody ain't had that journey.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It's like giving grace.
They are gonna look at you crazy. Like, how you doing this? How you praying to a white Jesus and you over here with a
and you be like, I ain't praying to white Jesus.
Well,
they ain't had that reckoning yet.
So because we do gotta wrap. Right?
Let me get some
now to introduce the next one.
You gotta go get dressed.
Yes.
So and I'm mad about the lead jacket because this part was for her. But to me, like in this conversation is helping to solidify my belief that this is a book that people need to read and discuss. Because I firmly believe that what we're talking about, this last part here, especially what Jackie was saying, is that you don't have to choose.
Which part was for me?
Right. What I'm about to say right now. You don't have to choose between being Christian and radical and your Black identity. You don't have to choose between being Republican
and Black.
Right? You don't have to choose between being Republican and a radical. right? A black radical. You don't have to choose. We all have our preferences about things, but ultimately, what he's talking about is, and that's why I do believe it is somewhat of a love letter to black churches, right? To, and as I talk about, like, his heritage of faith, from his grandmama to his parents to him, right? This is who we are. We are a Southern family of believers. And despite whatever's going on, we believe at the end of the day, God heals, right? There's salvation. And I think that his evolution was realizing that I can accept myself, I can read James Baldwin, Imani Perry, all these people, and still be a man of faith, be a pastor, be a minister, and still support my community in a struggle. And I think that's why this book was important. And I'm very interested to have a conversation with him about it, because that's where we need to progress the conversation to, and not have this binary that is one or the other. It has to be a continued conversation.
Definitely a good conversation.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
Yeah.
I came in here hot.
Right.
So
So I'm saying all that because I want anyone who watches this to, because there are a lot of differing opinions about it, right? What I want them to come away from with this is that's why you read the book, and even if you disagree with a lot of it, you have that conversation and try to and just do that work, right? That's the piece of it, to do that work and wrestle with it, fight with it, because.
You don't feel that way about Luster.
Yeah, I do not.
You don't feel that way about Luster. That book got so many. We got a whole combo about.
I will read her next book.
Oh wow!
Because I love. I think she's a great writer.
Who?
I did not. The woman who Raven
Leilani.
Dude, and we almost made it through.
We needed you last month. What did I do? Because we didn't.
Brought up
You weren't
Mustard.
feeling it.
So. Right, so there's
that was his suggestion.
It's Damon's suggestion, actually. We called him in the middle of it, like, bro, what were you doing? Why did you recommend this? He just started laughing in the middle of the conversation.
Did he have a reason why he recommended it?
He was like, man, it was
Whatever, this is blasphemy. I'm not gonna be on camera talking about it.
You're not.
We was good. We did real good last month. We didn't just say what.
Let's jump to the June book.
Let me see the library. Y'all know I'll be doing the library.
Let's get to the June book. Is Danielle Smith, Shine Bright. It is Black Music Month.
Yay!
This is the last book of the first half of our reading schedule. We have the next schedule ready to go. We'll be getting that up shortly for us, hopefully the next week. And we have some great books. I'm excited. I will say we do have S.A. Cosby up there, because I know we love.
We have Chain Gang All Stars.
Yeah, we got
some
really good books.
But we got Restless Resistance on there too, correct?
I don't know. I think we.
Oh,
Well,
no,
that's
no. I would got that.
I know,
What is this restless resistance? You know what I'm saying?
Happy wife, happy life.
I do want
Appreciating your guest appearance.
Yeah.
I should.
Just come a little earlier next time. Do a little earlier.
I'm going to change the time. But, would you mind talking about this book real quick?
Yeah, sure. For one, I'm a big fan of Danielle Smith, who has had various executive positions running magazines I know and love.
It's ready to be borrowed. Wow.
So, and plus, it's Black Music Month. This is a book dedicated to Black women in pop music and stuff like that. So I felt like we could cover a lot of bases. And I started reading it. I enjoy it. I'm one of those people that enjoys musical books and stuff like that. Like, I read everything that has something to do with music, especially for people that I know and respect. So hopefully I haven't finished it. So hopefully it's really good. Hopefully it gives us something to talk about. I doubt it'll be as controversial as this, but who knows? Who knows? Listen, we find controversy wherever we go. So that's, I'm excited. I'm excited to get into it.
Okay. So you guys can pick them up today from our Anacostia or National Harbor locations. Everyone online, you can go to MahoganyBooks.com, purchase your copy today. We will be having this conversation
July 7th.
July 7th.
I won't be here because it's my birthday.
While you're speaking, what did you think about the book? You didn't say that. You didn't say anything. What did you think about the book?
We'll share after camera. Anyway, as always, you guys remember.
Oh,
Black
wow.
Lives Matter.
Oh, my
Thank
God.
you
She did the
for
PSA.
I love it.
Wow,
I love it.
Brianna,
Thank you guys. Take care.
Brianna, what was your thoughts? You didn't say anything.
She on purpose, obviously.
No, I just
Feels
didn't
very close.
finish it. 'Cause I was
Oh.
and what I did, I mean, there's a
Did
lot
you
of
guys
voices
stop?
speaking, so I would